Hello, this is some old guy in Hawaii, and this video lays out how farm food output is calculated. Okay, we don't need to do the underlying math to optimize food output, but understanding it tells us how to best optimize that output. Now, this video also lays the foundation for other videos, including one I'm working on specifically about all things food. Now, to make it easy, we're going to work backwards. We'll start with big summarized production, then break things down into smaller and smaller details. Okay, so how do farms harvest food? This is the total per turn food output of this farm. This includes up to three things. Region harvest is how much food the farm itself produces. We'll be digging into that shortly. But it may also contain bonus food or food penalties from various sources, including some improvements, some events, perhaps some government policies or religious verses, etc. It's not always obvious where these bonuses originate, and it can sometimes be tough to figure out, and even if we dig. Extra food can also come from grants, which are, well, I actually don't know what those are for sure. I've seen +1 and +2 grants in various places so far. It's not consistent from one farm to the next in the same city or region or by farm type. Other improvements sometimes have them. Some don't. I have observed that the +2 extra food when building an industrial fishing farm shows up as a grant, but beyond that, it's kind of driving me nuts. Okay, if you know where this comes from, let me know in the comments. FYI, occasionally I see this weird entry here, +4.3b. Not sure what it means. It appears to show up when a farm is available for or in the process of being upgraded. I've seen one instance where at least one farm in the process of being upgraded did not show this. It does not have any appreciable effect on food production though. Probably a bug that we don't need to worry about. Okay, that's the total output of this farm. This down here is the production output of the farm, the region harvest. Okay, if we hover over this number, we get this summary. Total production per turn, production required, and items per turn. This is telling us the total production divided by the production requirement produces so many items, in this case food, per turn. Everything we build or craft or harvest in ARA requires production, which itself is a resource. And anything we build or craft or harvest has a production requirement. In the case of a plain land zone with no other underlying resource, the production requirement for food is 25. It takes 25 production to produce one food. If a farm generates 100 production per turn, it will produce 4 food per turn because 100 divided by 25 is 4. FYI, if a farm generates 80 food per turn, it will produce 3 food per turn and carry over 5 production to the next turn. Eventually, in this example after 5 turns, it will carry over enough production to generate an additional food that turn. This is why we sometimes see slight differences in output from otherwise identically set up farms of the same type in the same region. Okay. FYI, some plant and animal resources can also be harvested for multiple things, including food. We can drop a farm on rice, grapes, and white-tailed deer and harvest rice grain, grapes, and venison and a few other things respectively, or we can directly harvest food. White-tailed deer have the same 25-point requirement when harvesting food. Grapes is twice as that at 50, so probably not a good idea. Rice, however, has only a 10 production requirement when harvesting it for food. Harvesting rice for food is awesome. Keep an eye out for rice. Spend some turns stockpiling rice grain, which is useful for crafting, but then eventually switch to food production. Okay. Again, this is the total production of this farm divided by 25, which gives us this much food per turn. It even shows us the fractional amount that carries over. How does the production part work? We know about the 25 production per item food requirement. How does the farm generate this production? Okay, that's these formulas here. Okay, total farm production equals this farm production base value here plus city production plus extra production from supplies, experts, co-located non-farm improvements, and from other farms in the region. Farm production base value is the base, and all this stuff is added to that. We'll come back to this base value in a minute. Okay. City production shown here is the same city production in the overview. It adds a little to total production here, but is very important in another way we'll get to shortly. Okay. Supplies are goods that can be applied to an improvement to boost its capabilities or to activate helpful effects in its host city. Farms have 4 supply slots for specific supplies that we can slot after we unlock them and craft them. First, a plow or heavy plow, then fertilizer, power or fuel, and finally tractors. Okay. All of these create additional farm production. I'll explain how in a bit. Experts are unique citizens that can be applied to an improvement to expand its capabilities. Starting at tier 6, cities get 1 expert per tier level. There's always more slots and improvements than there are available experts, however, so we have to pick and choose where we use them. A standard farm has 1 expert slot. Irrigated farms add a 2nd, industrial farms add a 3rd. They create additional farm production, just like the supplies as shown, depending on how many are slotted. Co-located improvements increase the food production of any farms in the same region: water wells, granaries, and groceries. Again, I will explain how shortly. Lastly, every additional farm in a region adds +5 production to every other farm in the region. That's these numbers here. Okay, that's how we get total farm production. What is and how do we get this first number, this farm production base value, which is huge compared to everything else? That's this formula. 3 big factors that multiply each other plus a little extra production added on the end. These 3 factors, what I call farm harvest production base, or just harvest production, then region food, and then farm type multiplier, are the foundation of all farm production, and because they multiply each other, are extremely important in maximizing the food output of any farm. Let's start with the most important, the harvest production. Okay, this number is simply city production, which we referenced before, plus 5 additional production for every farm in the region, which is also something we've kind of seen before, although in this case it's every farm, not every other. It includes the farm we are looking at. For whatever reason, the game utilizes these things twice in the math. Up here, city production is just an add-on, as are these extra 5 points per farm. Here, though, they collectively function as the baseline for all farm production. This number is the biggest number in this equation. The next is no bigger than 4, and the next is no bigger than 3. Okay. Baseline city production is based primarily on city size or tier, with a few extras added by supplies and some improvements. But it can be increased by up to 100% by increasing happiness. It can also drop if happiness gets low. So if we want high production, and we can always use more, we need to grow our cities and keep happiness high. Now, the second half, which depends on the total number of farms in the region, can be no higher than 30 points, but its lowest value of 5 is still bigger than either of these next 2 multipliers. Okay, this tells us it's a really good idea to try and build the multiple farms together in the same region. Big city production plus a lot of farms in the same region make for big harvest production. Okay, this is also, by the way, what all these supplies, experts, and one co-located improvement refer to when they say increase harvest production. This is harvest production for this farm, and all these other improvements or supplies or experts add 50%, 100%, whatever percentage it says of that number to overall production. The bigger harvest production, the bigger the bonuses added by these. Okay. The next number, region food, is simply the base food value of the region, the number of apples, normally anywhere from 1 to 4, but it multiplies this first big important number, harvest production. Okay. That tells us we should try really hard to build farms in regions with high region food, preferably 3 or 4 apples. Now, putting these last 2 lessons together highlights a key strategy in maximizing food output. Build multiple farms in large, high food regions, 4 or more zones, 3 or more apples. Okay, this allows us to create superfood producing regions which can pump out a lot more food and are much more efficient than scattering farms across the map. Okay, additionally, harvest production times region food gives us region food yield. Region food yield is the basis for added production from these 2 collocated improvements and is also used in this last multiplier. This multiplier depends simply on the type of farm. For a standard farm, the number is 1. The modifier for a standard farm says plus 100% of region food yield is applied towards harvest production. All this means is a standard farm uses 100% of this region food yield. Okay, the language just pulls from the underlying programming and it can be a little confusing. The plus means positive, not added to anything. Okay, an upgrade irrigation farm plus 200% multiplies it by 2, and its upgrade, the industrial farm, plus 300% multiplies it by 3. Okay, we need to upgrade our farms promptly if we want to be able to keep up with growing population. Okay. The last 5 points are a little weird. My guess is that the plus 5 for every farm in the region bonus here applies to the current farm and not just to the others in the region, but it would look really weird if this had 2 entries for this farm. One big one from all this math and another one that's just plus 5, so it gets added here. I just know the math works out this way. Anyway, all this gives us the baseline production number here. Every other modifier from supplies, experts, and color improvements is added to this number to give us total food production. And that's it, except not quite. Since we're covering farm production, and I listed the fish and shellfish production requirements, and because it's industrial fish farms are farms and it tells us farm, and because food production from water towers is unfortunately a whole lot simpler, Might as well go over it here. Okay. Food can be harvested from coastal water regions, the coastal water biome. These regions typically have two zones and feature just food and gold, but can also feature fish or shellfish or whales. Zones with whales can't be harvested for food. Okay. Zones with just apples showing can be harvested for food. Shellfish can be harvested for food or rock salt or precious stones, and fish harvested for food, fish or tallow. The food production requirement for any of these is 10, like rice, which is great, but a fishing net only produces food production per turn equivalent to city production. This can be increased with an expert by 150%, but that's it. Nothing else matters. Baseline regional food, always 2 or 3 apples as far as I can tell, has no effect. There are no supply slots or related improvements. An industrial fishing farm provides 2 bonus food per turn, which I mentioned shows up as a grant, and a second expert slot, but the baseline production is the same, city production, and that's it. And in addition to the timber, it costs 20 machine parts to build, and it's not an upgrade of fishing nets. If we want to build it where fishing nets already exist, we have to demolish the nets first. Okay, 2 zones for a little bit of food might be okay very early, or if geographically all land times are used up. But claiming and exploiting coastal regions for actual food is not really worth it. Okay. And that's it finally. I hope to get more videos out soon, one on food in general, which in addition to improvements delves more into the other big way to satisfy food needs, amenities. I'm also hoping to do a video on when, if ever, it's actually a good idea to co-locate one of these improvements here in the same region as multiple farms, vice just building another farm. It's a topic I've seen people go back and forth on about on the forums, and my initial test results, now that I know the formulas, appear very interesting. Okay. In any case, if you like this kind of comment and want to see more, you know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe, stay safe. Thanks for watching.